if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. These are the words of Senator Shirley Chisholm, America's first female Black senator. And I love that quote. It reminds me of how I, as a woman, often feel underrepresented in politics. I often feel that I, especially as somebody who cares about issues like sexism, racism, and discrimination, am not part of that important conversation. It worries me. Luckily, the world is changing. And as we will continue to see, women will have many more stories to tell you. This is my story. I am from the Netherlands, but my story starts in Suriname. Suriname, for those of you who haven't heard of it, is a small country on the north side of South America. It was a former Dutch colony and also the country that my father is from. It is December 2016, and my family and I are on vacation there. We visited a museum where I came across a 20-year-old flyer by a Surinamese women's organization. It read, "Kies bewust, stem op een vrouw," or "Choose consciously, vote for a woman." The flyer explained how women make up half of the population, but that this was not reflected in actual parliament. And it called upon voters to correct the injustice simply by voting for women. So back home, I started looking at the numbers of female representation in the Netherlands. And I knew it would be bad, because I knew we had never had a female prime minister, very few female party leaders, but I didn't know it was going to be this bad. I did not know that only 35% of members in parliament, 28% in municipality, 20% of mayors were women. And there was a staggering lack of diversity in general. Now, I won't bore you with any more numbers, so just take my word for it. It was, and it still is, really bad. And though this information kind of pissed me off, it also confirmed the way that I experienced politics. It confirmed the way I experienced society as a whole. That we as women might be equal by law, but that we still have a long way to go before we gain full equality. I realized that as long as we are not fully represented in politics, we would continue to feel the consequences in society. Now, historically, this lack of women isn't strange. And to explain what I mean by that, I'm going to quickly talk with you about democracy. You see, democracy has this idea around it that it means something similar to power to the people, right? But it was never intended that way. Take the Netherlands, for example. In 1848, our constitution was amended in that we now see as the start of our modern democracy. Yet, only 3% of the population gained the right to vote. The requirements needed to vote were simplified, that you were a man and your wealth was above a certain amount. It wasn't until over 70 years later that all men gained the right to vote, and 2 years after that, in 1919, finally so did women. But that means that for all those 70 years, our democracy had been shaped by these rich elite men that had the time to create the basic rules, the culture, the topics discussed in which our democracy functioned. It's like they created a game, they made up all the rules, and then they mastered the game, and then they let everybody else play. Back to my story. I was now back from vacation, and there would be parliament elections in 3 months, in March 2017. The candidate lists then showed about 30% women on the lists. And that meant nothing would change. It actually meant even fewer women were going to make it into parliament. I wanted to do something. I wanted to do what that Surinamese organization did and call on people to vote for women. So I started asking around in my network and friends, saying, hey, I have this idea, and maybe somebody would like to help. And miraculously, really quickly, this group gathered. So we started planning. We met in the evenings and in the weekends, outside of our day jobs, and created the idea of an online campaign calling on voters to vote for women. We were all, that's mostly what I remember, is just how excited we were of that idea, that we were gonna do this, we were gonna get women elected. And then we hit a wall. You see, we found out that a lot of people were actually already voting for women, usually the highest placed candidates on the list. But these highest placed women would, of course, due to their high spot, already make it into parliament without all those preferential votes anyway. So all that voting for those women did was give them a bunch more symbolic votes than they needed that were actually handed down the rest of the candidate lists to the 70% men on those lists. So we found out that voting for women was actually benefiting the men as well. Were we really gonna campaign something that we knew was just gonna be something symbolic? Thankfully, then one of my teammates came up with an old but brilliant tactic that she knew. We had to use preferential voting differently. Let me explain to you how this works. Let's say a political party has 10 candidates on the list, and the polls say that only 5 candidates are going to make it into parliament. And the number 2, 6, and 7, they are women. That means woman number 6 and 7 aren't going to make it, right? Unless voters use their individual power to vote specifically for them. Because we tend to forget that we do not vote for a political party, we vote for an individual. And if an individual gets enough votes, they will make it into politics. And if candidates number 6 and 7 got enough votes, they would actually take the place of number 4 and 5, both men. Great tactic, right? So now all we had to do was make sure that women lower on the candidate lists got tens of thousands of preferential votes. But we continued. We built this awesome website, and we wrote our text materials, we prepared for any critique we could get, and we let all our parents and our friends know, like, hey, we're working on this great idea. Please, when we're online, share it. We wrote a press release, posted our message, and then we waited. And within an hour, the phone rang. It was the biggest national news outlet asking for an interview. And from that moment on, the phone just kept ringing. Our message was everywhere. Everybody was talking about it, media was writing about it, and so many people were asking us, why have we never heard of this tactic? I don't know. But I wouldn't be standing here if it hadn't worked. Because that first election, with just a bunch of volunteers and no money, we got 3 extra women elected. And we realized from that moment on, this was not just us anymore. These were those tens of thousands of voters that did this. We started a movement, and that movement has only grown. Earlier this year, we campaigned again towards the municipality elections, and dozens of extra women were elected. Dozens! Some with only 10 more votes than their male colleagues above them. Now, here's what I love about this. First, our work has empowered individual voters. You see, politics is regarded with a certain mistrust, the idea that your vote doesn't matter. We showed voters that if they vote smartly, they can actually affect change. The second thing I love is the shock we gave political parties. You see, they put great effort in creating their candidate lists. And there we were, basically asking people to hack those lists with their votes, and show parties this is what we want in Parliament. We have pressured parties to create more diverse candidate lists, to do better. And the third thing I love is that our work has empowered women, because we have shown them that not only are they needed in politics, but that they are wanted and they can count on voter support. We started a movement, and we are making it grow. Ever since this year, we've started organizing election debates to give female politicians a bigger stage. We are organizing training days for women who want to candidate themselves to give them the tools they need. And we have only just begun. I started this talk with Senator Chisholm's words. If they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. Our votes are our folding chairs. In May 2019, you and I will elect the next European Parliament. I want to encourage you to vote, and to vote specifically for those candidates whose stories and whose ideas are not well enough represented right now. Because I truly believe that better representation will result in more equality, more empathy, more peace. Please vote. And remember, if you don't have a seat at the table, there is someone else sitting in your chair. Thank you.